So, questions for our panel. We have a good 15 minutes for some questions. Yes. Hang on for a mic. That will be easier.
I was just wondering if the panel would make their slides available for us to look at or download later.
Yep.
Thank you.
That was an easy question.
Yeah, here in front.
Hello, my name is Fidan. I'm actually from Azerbaijan, so I love
Hey!
My question would be to Mr. Chapkar. So you told that being transparent is important while you go to the digital platforms. And I know a lot of companies, they understand that and they try to be online, they create websites, though they are afraid to go to social media. And one of the reasons is losing control, because it's very hard to control consumers in the social media, and being transparent is a good tool, especially in the beginning when you do something. But how would you react during the crisis if some launch, product launch or service launch went wrong, or when your customer department, the frontline people didn't do the way you expected, and there is a big boom, there is a big buzz from the consumers? What's the strategy you would take?
I think answering the first part, I totally agree. Going into the social space, going into the public, as I said, opening the curtains or opening the kimono, it's very, very difficult, and it will lead to quite a bit of turbulence in the beginning. I do not underestimate that, because we will be showing all the uglies in the company to our customers. But that turbulence leads to fixing things that should have always been fixed. I've found, without giving details, I've found that actually some things have been wrong for years, and just when we went public, that's when we fixed it. So I think anyone who takes this journey should be ready for that turbulence, and should have to hold the nerve through the turbulence in order to win finally. Because I'm absolutely convinced all of us will become better companies and better brands if you do that. Regarding crisis, I do not have direct experience, but I can tell you what my instinct would be: to give all the information. All the information. We are doing it for small issues, like when someone's connections are down, services are down. We try to give as much information as possible. And again, it's an opt-in information. We don't vomit so much information that it's not comprehensive anymore. But if the consumer wants, they can get all the information they want. So my instinct, if there was a product crisis, would be to be very honest and with the consumers. And you would be very surprised. Consumers are quite forgiving and quite generous. They appreciate honesty.
Tamara?
Well, I totally agree. I mean, all experiences and communications, if you actually enable the consumers to ask you those questions and respond authentically and honestly, it's much better for a crisis, and it builds the trust agenda. I think most brands and most companies know that the trust agenda is becoming increasingly important in the world. So by putting that information out there is important. And actually, it gives you a win rather than hiding it.
Thank you.
Can I just add something else? One of the advantages of putting stuff in the public domain, it compels your company to act. Yeah. If you hide it, you'll have lots of meetings, etc. People hide. Once it's in the public, no one can hide. It forces everyone to act.
Thanks.
Behind you,
Hi, my name is Martha Miller, and that was really stupendous from all three of you. Thank you so much. Wow. Tamara, now I remember why I love advertising so much. Man, that was fun. Blew me away. I have a question related to the corporate campaign, because I think, Tim, you were very, very involved in this, and I'm sure, Tamara, you've also been involved in reading the results. I know this was the product of having worked on it 20 years ago, of a lot of stuff within the company to come out and be brave enough to take a corporate campaign and launch it at the Olympics. I'd be very interested to know about the evaluation of the results on that, because it really was such a long gestation period, I would say, and from an outside perspective, looked like a fantastic campaign. But have you got the numbers? Have you got the consumer research? And what do you envision as that going forward for the company?
I think Tim's handed that very difficult one over to me.
Well,
I'll
I'll start then, because I believe you're talking about the Moms campaign that was used in the Olympics. Yeah, the one I was involved in was the one where the company, it was the first time in the company's history that they developed a corporate campaign, and it started as an internal campaign because the company had lost so much confidence when the share price went from 115 to 55 overnight. That was a different program. It was more internal and eventually became external, and that was Touching Lives, Improving Life. The Moms campaign was a specific initiative that the company decided to take on a long-term partnership with the Olympics. And with that involved all the brands, and the question was, how do you aggregate that and how do you build scale? And that's where the Moms campaign made so much sense. I know that Tamar's probably been closer to it since then than I have. But
Just some learnings that I've got, rather, but I mean, I think it has been quite an interesting, controversial step. I mean, I know in Asia, when we put, do you remember the P&G logo on our brands, it did actually have a very good effect about driving preference. So actually, if you take the strategic thought about companies being very open about themselves, back to what we were saying, and being prepared to talk about themselves as a corporation, it actually has an effect on building business and has an effect on people understanding the company you are and where the brands come from. So I think generally, overall, it's a very good move. Now, if we then look at the Olympics, I would say, and I hope this is not being written about in any way, I would say it's been a mixed bag. I'm going to be very honest with you. So I think on one level it's been very good for the company because it's been fantastic for a marketing direction and shown great courage. And I think P&G, for the first time being connected with something like that, were world beating, by the way. I mean, the extraordinary way that you got behind the Olympics was defining for a proof of P&G's brilliant marketing effort. And I think it did a great deal for the reputation. Now, to be frank, some brands did well in it, other brands didn't do so well at it. And I think there's some very obvious learnings. We're not here to sell the Olympics, right? So brands that just sold the Olympics and had nothing relevant and didn't do particularly well, and frankly was a waste of money. Secondly, from my point of view, there wasn't enough focus on the brands that were relevant, but don't quote me on that. But the brands that actually related to their benefit and gave a reason to purchase them and linked the Olympics in a very solid way, like Febreze, I think had done very well out of it. So I think the same rules of brand building actually apply to the Olympics. But in essence, overall, just like we were talking about on the net, I think companies have to be prepared now to be very public about themselves. How they do it, I think, is the important thing.
And the company's being very, very careful with that because the company's always been a company of brands, not a branded company.
Yeah.
But with a 10-year commitment to the Olympics, and the next one's coming up in Russia and then Brazil, this question is really being examined very closely. And I don't think I think the brand's voice is still given a lot of power at P&G on this question as to what they got out of it, what their role will be in the next one. And there is some fear about altering something that the company always had, which was the diversity of its brands.
There was a question back there? Yeah.
It started as a question, but now it becomes a bit of a statement. I'm actually leading the P&G brand in Olympics in Western Europe, and there is data. The data absolutely confirms what Tamara said from a brand perspective, but the total data for the campaign, where we've done market mix modeling and been able to isolate the impact of Olympics in what was a very turbulent half year for us, is extremely positive. We saw all the brands in the campaign positively benefit from that. We saw disproportionate uplift on those brands that were deeply associated with the Olympics through a brand-specific campaign that was based on a meaningful insight and a benefit-driven idea. So absolutely, we saw that. Now we're looking forward. It's a long-term partnership, and we're saying, how do we draw on the learning from London to have an even stronger play at the Sochi Olympics? And I'm actually, in the moment, engaged in reviewing our market plans in the Western European MDOs, and they're extremely strong in those MDOs where winter sports is relevant. And we're already seeing the teams leveraging what they learned London to create much stronger plans with meaningful brand plays, and so get also the brand scope right. And we're feeling really good about that. So the data is good. But I was going to ask a question anyway, because I find the topic that we were talking about, activating with transparency. I find that extremely interesting because, of course, there is a tremendous amount of internal discussion and nervousness about going external with the P&G brand and inviting conversation. Inviting conversation that through our conversational calendars we are trying to, of course, set up for the positive, but the turbulence, as you so rightly put it, does come, and uncomfortable questions are asked. And so I found that very interesting to talk about, engage with transparency. But I wanted to ask, what needs to be in place? What needs to be in place to be prepared to have a coherent conversation that is positive and is prepared for the negative on the P&G brand?
Yeah, why don't you start structuring that?
I'll start from a general point. I can't answer the P&G specific one. What needs to be in place is, number one, a commitment from the leadership, right from the top. If that commitment is not there, at the first storm, it will be shut down. And in my current assignment, I've been fortunate that actually the right at the top, from the chairman to the CEO, they are committed to making this happen. We call it deep transparency. Number two, have in place the mechanisms and the channels to respond, because consumers will ask questions. A lot of them you can use automation and other means to allow consumers to self-serve, but there are other questions where consumers will ask. The worst thing you can do is open up your door, get someone come in, and not engage. The disappointment is bigger. I would say those are the things you have to have in place, and the commitment to continue. It's my experience, every time we have done that, the first 2-3 months have been, no, it's more than 2-3 months, the first 6 months I would say has been extremely difficult, because we are showing the problems we've had in the company. We're opening it up. And it's very, very embarrassing. There's a loss of face and all the associated things. We just need to have everyone on side and get everyone to hold the nerve, because you will come out well on the other side. I'll give you another example. Sorry, just continue. Right now, my company at the moment, we have a problem in our satisfaction. We acknowledge that. In fact, compared to P&G, we are a far worse place. We acknowledge that, but we are willing to do that because that's the only way we're going to improve.
Just a couple of other observations, because I entirely support that. Everything you know true about brand building remains the same. Being very clear about your voice. What is your tone of voice? Being very clear about what it is you stand for, what the story it is about you. I think that enables it then to unfold. Now, what I think P&G struggle with is this is a minute by minute, always on, ready, steady, go. You can't have the heavy approval systems. So you not only need the commitment from the top, but you need a new process, new system that it has an immediacy. And I think that's the area we have problems with, to be perfectly honest. I think that's the organizational structure that changes we need to make place, because it has to be very quick, instant, and you have to let your leadership who are responsible for doing it do it.
Thank you. Yes?
Hi, I'm Nancy Swears, and I'm in the kids space working with toys. The dream is to have the children, the consumers, share in the co-creation of toys. We keep coming up against this issue of competitive confidentiality, revealing too much about where we're going to our competition, and I think about this whole dynamic of transparency. definitely creates issues related to competitive confidentiality. I'm just curious to know what kinds of conversations you have about that, and if there are mechanisms that are in place that could alleviate those issues.
It's a fair challenge, and it's a challenge we encounter on a day-to-day basis. So the way I'm dealing with it is initially starting with my own company, using the staff. We have a couple of thousand staff, and they're all consumers, and using them, engaging them in our co-creation. And then gradually, with a limited number of consumers, accepting the risk that opens us to our competitors. But the fact is, if you're already there, we are 6 months, 12 months ahead of our competition. And at one point, and maybe 3 to 6 months away from the point you would have anyway shown it. But the benefits far exceed that cost of the competitor risk, in my view. And it will differ from sector to sector. But I just want to come back on the co-creation one, because whenever I talk about it, most people say, yes, it makes sense on the website. Will it ever happen in manufacturing? And I am so sure that co-creation is going to change. In fact, all of the manufacturing industry is set for upheaval. Some of the dynamics of the internet industry is coming into the manufacturing industry. And within a decade, most of the manufacturing industry will look very different. Toys is a brilliant example.
Like the 3D printing.
3D
absolutely.
printers, absolutely.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Susan Donis. I'm in the loyalty industry. Can you talk about this world of transparency and everything being available everywhere, and what implications you see for privacy, whether it's around age generations, government, just anything that you would like to expound upon?
I think it's a very fine and difficult. Tim's filmed the AOL, is it good or is it not good? Actually, I think summarise that, because we have an opportunity with data to be able to really answer people's needs, which is a wonderful thing. Anticipate where they're going to be there to help them, giving them solutions, the use of mobile, the use of big data. It's an extraordinary opportunity we have. And yet, for some people, that's very difficult because it's giving parts of their lives away. And I think we have to have a clarity as a company, depending what it's about, an opt-in. I don't think we should ever give away people's data or share it in a way unless they have not opted in to be used in that way. We have to have very strict and careful privacy ideas, wherever we come from, by the way, whether we work in the social space or a corporate space, because the one time we bust that, okay, and we treat a human being with disregard, is we affect our whole reputation. But it is an opportunity for people as well, and it's just getting that balance right.
Completely agree. One of the things the digital world does is create floods of data, and holding that with integrity is one of the biggest risks most companies have, and most companies have not recognized that. My personal view is, if I were to, and we will end up in that place, is get every customer, show every customer all the information you hold about the customer. Make it visible and transparent to them. And they allow them to delete, amend, or change their permissions. That's what I would do. We're far away from there, but that's the place, because you're holding so much data that unless you make it transparent to consumers, most customers are willing to enter into a value exchange with you, privacy versus some value in return. And so long as you make it so visible and obvious to the customer, I think you'll be fine.
One of the things, good news, is that I was on a task force at P&G in 1999, where the company was looking at service opportunities with privacy. And it took me 2 months to figure out what the subject was, but it sure is now, and your question's very, very relevant. One of the things is that there's a lot of talk about big data, and you'll hear more and more about that. And basically think of it as that we're going to have more information available to us next year and the year after, boatloads, truckloads. We'll be able to ask every question and know everything that we want to be able to ask. That means the role of somebody who can contextualize in that sea of data will be even more valuable than they are today. So the brand manager, the objective agency partner, in my opinion, and they will have some pretty significant decisions to make from a values and ethical standpoint. And you're going to read more and more about this because people are worried about the yin and yang of the freedom that comes and the level of control. And probably the most difficult issue right now being considered is how do you self-regulate in a world where individuals create content? And that's where the rub happens. But I can tell you our industry and your company is very much engaged in this.
That just said one last question. Okay, you have been raising your hand for a while.
Sorry, Frank Captola. And I especially enjoyed your discussion, the matchbook through the cab window, the Victoria's Secret on the internet. It seems to me that one of the challenges that we haven't discussed yet is the big loser in all of this is government, because they can't put a spin on things anymore. If you want to see a shooting in Iraq, the cell phone camera is taking that, and the president of that country can't delay it, or the information's instant.
Right.
What's your thoughts on how government is going to react to all these changes?
Well, I may be more optimistic than most people, but I think through that kind of realization is coming some very, very positive actions from governments in China and the United States. The first area is that the schools of public policy that I've been working with in the last year, like the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, the Public Policy School at Yale, they're realizing that they need to be closer to understanding how ideas get set and permeate. And so they're much more open, and you're hearing people talk about city branding, and a lot of advertising people think it's cool to talk about nation branding. But what it really is a blending of public policy, education, and communications. And it's going to evolve, it's evolving now where governments are actively inviting in marketing people, not to help them market, false information, but how to manage an idea, how to manage a crisis. And some people are calling this combined field sovereign relationship marketing, so that it's broader than just the tourist campaign. And I think that this is going to be good because all this just means that government's going to have to be more responsive to the individual. And they're going to have to listen more and figure out how to, because they're going to hear right away from the individuals if they're not doing the right thing.
I have a slightly different point of view. The same in terms of responsiveness, but actually I think the power of governments is very different to what it was than when I was a child. Mm-hmm. And actually I think we're living where companies and individuals make a greater difference to the world. I mean, frankly, P&G can affect the world more than the government I've been, I used to brought up with. In fact, they're powerless, in relation to companies. So what do I think this does? I think this puts a huge amount of responsibility into corporations. That's why it's absolutely critical we get that level of responsibility right. And also it shows to me the Margaret Mead quote again, that the power of individuals and the social connections you can make to change the world. I don't see governments as actually making enough change in the world and a bit behind where people are. So I think that it is good that there will be more responsiveness, but in reality I think it puts a lot of burden onto companies, and I think companies are changing the world much faster than governments. And the delivery, the alleviation of poverty and helping women is much more driven by other people and companies than governments, quite frankly. Doesn't take away the governance issues, by the way.
My view is just like in other parts, it's shifting the power where it should be to the individual. Now, I grew up in a small town in India where the only information you had was what your elders told you, what the government said in 1 hour of television in black and white, and that was the only information. That was the world. And I see the kids at the same age today, in the same town. They know everything. So you can't fool them. It's a big problem for the parents, but but you can't fool them. So the power is shifting. The kids are growing up knowing that they can get what they want. They have information. It's wonderful to see the transformation, because right now power is shifting where it always should be, to the person, to the citizen.
Super. Well, thank you very much. This was a very interesting discussion. So we have our break now. Please be back here in 15 minutes, because we really have another great session going and we want to respect the time. So we'll start up again at 10:45. Thank you.